Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the Kurdistan Connection, the first episode of 2024, with myself, Matt Broomfield, here on Media News. I'm very glad today to be joined for the second time by a colleague of mine and a very useful source on the ground in Kurdish-led north and east Syria, Samantha Teal, a researcher at the Rojava Information Centre. Samantha, you're very welcome.
Hi Matt, nice to be here.
Hi. We've spoken with Samantha before and we're speaking with her again today to get a bit of a first-hand perspective from on the ground in the Kurdish-led regions, which for a long time, but particularly throughout the second half of last year, experienced kind of wave after wave of aerial attacks conducted by the Turkish armed forces, particularly targeting civilian infrastructure, humanitarian infrastructure. There was a very big wave of attacks a few months ago, which we covered here on Media News. But again, over the Christmas period, there's been sort of a second large wave, a kind of follow-up wave, striking this region, which already suffers from a lot of challenges and hardship, which we will discuss today. Samantha, I just wanted to bring you on the show again today, and perhaps you could just begin by sharing what's kind of happened in the last couple of weeks in terms of a new wave of Turkish attacks.
Like you say, it was just over 2 weeks ago that Turkey launched yet another kind of multi-day aerial assault on north and east Syria, and really targeting civilian infrastructure and service facilities yet again. And so in these most recent airstrikes, which were around the Christmas period, Turkey hit grain storage warehouses, a cement factory, car mechanic, olive oil factory, grains packaging factory, a clothing factory, a printing house, industrial facilities, warehouses for storing construction materials, a wedding hall, 2 medical facilities, as well as an oil field and an electricity station, and then finally a kind of string of checkpoints of the internal security forces in north and east Syria. And the city most severely targeted was Karmishlo, one of north and east Syria's biggest cities, which has a significant Christian minority, so their holy period was also disrupted. And like you say, this came, not 3 months after a similar string of airstrikes in early October really decimated the power and energy infrastructure here in north and east Syria, and the repercussions of that attack was still being felt here in terms of electricity and water cuts, including from hospitals and schools and bakeries, as well as fuel and gas shortages. And then, of course, the impact on the autonomous administration, the DAANES itself, in terms of losing oil revenues for income and just facing mounting costs of repairing all its infrastructure again and again. And what we're really seeing now is gas and oil and electricity production declining and prices for gas and oil increasing on the black market in the situation where already people do not have enough of these things. And the DAANES is less able to provide them to people at the required level. And the fuel shortages are also going to affect the cost of goods and food products and transport costs. Already the underlying economic situation here is difficult, with rapidly rising prices and widespread poverty. And so Turkey is really targeting vital services here, when the underlying situation is already perilous and the region has been devastated by years of war and embargo.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of these points that I'd like to follow up on. Maybe firstly, so as you said, this last wave of strikes primarily targeted Kamishlo, largest Kurdish majority city in the region, but also home to these Christian minorities. You were also there in Kamishlo during these attacks. What was the mood in the city when this happened, and how do things feel there today? When you walk around in the city.
Mm-hmm. The mood at the time of the attacks was both fear and kind of anger. There were protests, marches against the attacks in all major cities, including Karmishlo. The anger felt by the civilian population was high because everyone could see that it was civilian facilities being directly targeted. This was very clear. And when the population here can see American bases and American soldiers here, but America not doing anything to prevent Turkey, that also means the resentment and anger was very high, but then also, feelings of desperation, fear and desperation. This is happening yet again. Turkey is making life really unlivable here. And for example, we went to the olive oil factory that was hit and interviewed the owner of that factory. And he was saying he was from Afrin and had an olive oil factory there. When Turkey invaded Afrin in 2018, he was displaced. He said his factory was also looted by the Syrian National Army when they came in. He lived in refugee camps in Shahba for a while and then came to this region, the northernmost region, Amude, near Karmishlo, where he again set up his olive oil factory. And then again now, Turkey has bombed his factory. He said he's incurred around $200,000 in damages. And, in these kind of conditions, civilians are not going to pursue a future here. People will not see their future in this region. And so Turkey is also really encouraging displacement.
And would you say that from your perspective, what's the rationale behind these attacks? That, as you say, a lot of these targets, it's quite clear, there's no possible, it's quite brazen. There's not an attempt to present it as attacks on military infrastructure. Turkey is setting out to deliberately target an olive oil factory, a printing press, etc. What's the rationale, and is Turkey able to achieve its objectives?
Yes, I think one big aim is to stop the autonomous administration from being able to utilize what precious little resources it does have and be able to develop good service institutions, to undermine the belief of the population in the autonomous administration, so people don't see their future in the project that the autonomous administration is trying to develop here. And I think also a real key aim is really striking these sites of production that are new, that have been built in the last 10 years. Considering the longer region of this, the longer history of this region, the northernmost part of Syria, which is like these Kurdish majority areas, under the Syrian government were kind of neglected. There was no factories here. There was very little production other than wheat being grown and oil being extracted. And so over the last 10 years, the autonomous administration really put effort into building up the production capacity of this small region so that it can become more self-sufficient, so that it doesn't rely so much on expensive imports from generally hostile neighboring states and regions. And so Turkey is also really targeting these efforts of the last 10 years to build up some kind of productive capacity in this region. And as far as the kind of wider reasons for this goes, like Turkey has made it clear it's not going to tolerate a Kurdish-led entity on its southern border. And this Ankara's Syria policy is driven by its domestic anti-Kurdish approach as well, and opposition to any kind of political autonomy for Kurds in Turkey as well.
Absolutely. So, as you've mentioned, these strikes come and they've hit some of these, diminish the productive capacity, let's say, of the region. More generally, what's the kind of economic situation right now in the region, and how has the administration been trying to cope with that difficult situation?
Yeah, so in not just this region, but Syria as a whole, the cost of living has been rising rapidly, and the value of the Syrian pound has been falling. In the north and east Syria region, the autonomous administration has been putting in efforts to soften the blow of this, wider economic situation on its population, in terms of trying to, for example, raise incomes of autonomous administration employees, which is a significant proportion of the population, and also subsidize fuel and gas and bread for the population. And even though, the economic conditions overall in the whole country are pretty terrible, the living conditions in the north and east Syria region are better than in the government-controlled region.
Yeah. So maybe you've said that one of the aims of these strikes is clearly to kind of make life unlivable for ordinary people, and perhaps relatedly to make people feel like the autonomous administration can't protect them, that they should leave the region or seek some other form of governance because they're being exposed to these attacks. Do you think these attacks are kind of working to diminish the morale of the population of ordinary people living in the region?
It's on the one hand, yes. On the one hand, no. I mean, like I already mentioned, no, in the immediate aftermath of the attacks, people were on the streets, people were protesting, people were calling for a no-fly zone. No, there was a very clear spirit of, this is our home. You are attacking our home, you are attacking our livelihoods, and we will not let this happen. We will do what we can to protect the place we live in. And indeed, there was also groups of civilians going to an electricity plant and surrounding it to create a kind of human shield, saying, if you want to strike our infrastructure, you will also have to kill us. So there was this on the one hand. And on the other hand, there are also people, of course, saying in these conditions, how can we build a life here? How can we send our children to school here when schools are continually being disrupted because Turkey is yet again carrying out airstrikes, or farmers who cannot go to their fields near the border because there is always Turkish shelling. And so it's, on the one hand, Turkey is succeeding in its aim of pushing people out of this region. On the other hand, it's not. I think it's the sentiment in the population is twofold,
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe you could also speak a bit about the official response. You've spoken about the anger and also the fear that civilians are feeling as a result of this. But what are the civilian and political and indeed military leaders in the region saying in response to these attacks?
Yeah, so the civilian and political, political and military, civilian and military leaders in North and East Syria have been very outspoken in, firstly, obviously condemning the attacks, but disappointment in the response of America, who is officially allied with the Syrian Democratic Forces here in order to fight ISIS in this region. And ISIS is still active in this region, as the ongoing sleeper cell attacks attest to. And so, Maslem Abdi, the commander-in-chief of the Syrian Democratic Forces, to Ilham Ahmed, a top Syrian Kurdish politician here and the former co-chair of the Syrian Democratic Council, amongst others, have really condemned America's silence in the face of the attacks. And they have also been proposing that this is that America's silence is linked to Turkey using Sweden's NATO accession as a kind of tool to get what it wants in this region, to kind of buy America's silence while Turkey attacks America's ally here.
And what is there anything sort of particular that can be said about the impact of these attacks on the anti-ISIS mission? Like, is this just a question of the more the region suffers, the more ISIS can benefit, or how are these two things related?
Figures within the SDF have long been saying that they are facing difficulties fighting a kind of multi-front war, that they are facing Turkish attacks in the north, they are facing ISIS attacks across the region, also Iran-backed militias in the Deir ez-Zor region have also upped their activity recently. And so facing kind of many threats at once. Obviously the time and the energy and resources that can go into fighting ISIS is reduced. And then ISIS can obviously exploit difficult social and economic conditions and resentment towards the administration with typical civilian grievances like high prices and low wages and inflation and instability, infrastructure being destroyed and little reconstruction, all these grievances that can be easily exploited.
What then is the message, I guess, that these leaders are delivering? Is their message essentially directed to the United States and saying you should do more in this region? Do they really think the US is going to do something more, or are they just do they feel like they're being left to fend for themselves?
I think it's difficult because the US is somehow the one they see the US as the one who can stop this, who has the power to stop Turkey, because they are in this region and because the power they have within the world stage more broadly, of course. And I don't think there's much more that the SDF, ANES, Syrian Democratic Council can do in the face of these Turkish attacks. No, so they are somehow calling to America and the international community more broadly to pay attention, to see the damages on the fight against ISIS, the threat this poses for the whole world, not just this region, and respond. Can you say the original question again? I've kind of forgotten.
I also just wanted to ask, maybe as the sort of penultimate question. I saw that I think it was Saleh Muslim, one of the leaders, issued a statement to say that if these attacks continued, the SDF, who withdrew formally from the border regions in 2019, might be forced to come back to the border in order to defend it. And what do you think was kind of meant by this? Like, is this just a kind of a statement that the region is going to continue to stand up against Turkey? Could we see some other change in the local, geopolitical alignment?
I mean, all of the political and military leaders have expressed a sentiment that we will defend ourselves. If Turkey is attacking like this, we will defend ourselves. It's our legitimate right to defend ourselves. And what precisely that will involve in terms of movements on the ground is unclear. And also know that SDF will have always emphasized that we are not posing a threat to Turkey. We are not attacking across the border in any way. And Turkey invoking some kind of right of self-defense, or their right of self-defense as a justification for these attacks has no basis. But if Turkey continues like this, we have a right to self-defense.
Yeah, of course. And let me then sort of wrap up by asking you. So now we're here at the start of 2024. You've been there in the region for some years now. How are things going to play out over the coming year? It's a very volatile geopolitical situation. These Turkish attacks have badly affected the region. Do we expect more of the same? Will something change one way or the other?
For now, it looks like as long as America and Russia continue to deny Turkey permission for a ground invasion, that this kind of, these methods of Turkey, these warfare methods will continue. So these kind of, like I said at the beginning, limited but highly destructive multi-day aerial assaults, now and again targeting infrastructure. And then the kind of ongoing drone strikes that really specifically target political and military leaders, people with experience, people who are, really at the forefront of furthering stability and socioeconomic progress here. I mean, we've seen the co-chairs of the autonomous administration's justice body assassinated. We've seen the Karmishlo Canton co-chair assassinated too. These kind of figures who have been really important for the growth of the region being specifically targeted by Turkey in drone strikes. And so it's these kind of methods of warfare that Turkey is very effectively using and likely will continue to use in this year. And then at the same time, obviously the war in Gaza is continuing, and this is affecting this region too, in the sense that Iran-backed militias have become more active, attacking American bases with rockets. And like I already said, in Deir ez-Zor, where Iran-backed militias have a significant presence on the Syrian government side of the river, their attacks on the SDF there are also rising because Iran wants America out of Syria. America is supporting the SDF. And so there's kind of a tit for tat with America and Iran there. And also in an interview, Maslem Abdi, the SDF commander-in-chief, was really clear, saying, an interview with Al Monitor, saying, I do not want our region to become a place where these tit-for-tat attacks between big powers occur on. And so NES's leaders, North and East Syria's leaders, are continuing to say, we want to develop peace and security and stability here. But no, this desire is really confronted with the wider geopolitical situation, which runs counter to these desires.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult neighborhood for anybody, and particularly trying to tread this kind of third way between these warring power blocks. It is difficult even without a neighbour like Turkey increasing the pressure so brutally. So yeah, thank you, Samantha, for joining us today and for sharing that grim but necessary update from on the ground in Kurdish-led north and east Syria. It's a region which faces a lot of challenge in trying to steer this very difficult third way path between these warring powers, as you've mentioned at the end there. So we're very grateful to you for your time and for sharing your insights from on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
Thank you. This has been the Kurdistan Connection on Media News with myself, Matt Broomfield. Until the next programme, goodbye.